Enzo Maresca, manager from Leicester City, is now officially the new manager, actually not even a manager, head coach for Chelsea. Looks like our sporting directors are putting all their eggs into the Enzo basket, so let's talk about it. All right, welcome back everyone to the American Blues Podcast. Your host Terry Lee. Let's get into Enzo Maresca now. I have been reading Chelsea news, transfer news, all these rumors every single day over the past, week or so since Pochettino has been sacked or, mutually left the club. And it seems like Enzo Maresca is our guy. Now, how do I feel about this overall? I don't know. I don't know anything about him. He was not anywhere close to my top manager list. Like personally, I would have wanted Flick, just someone who's highly experienced, strong personality, German, all the things that I like in a manager. I wanted him to come in and actually study the ship, provide some actual substance to our extremely young squad. And I felt like we need experience. But of course, looking at our sporting directors, they want anything but experience. They want brand new, someone who is willing to fit into their system, which is have no say over transfers, be a coach only, not a manager, just a coach. Let the sporting directors manage the rest of the club, all the recruitment, and that's who they're looking for, and that's who they got. Now, I've watched a lot of stuff, a lot of opinions on how he's going to be, what kind of formation he likes, what kind of style play he is, which one of our players will thrive and flourish, which one will fail, whatever. It's all pretty, I think, pretty unknown until the season really starts. But I do think there are some interesting things about this new manager. Number one, very important, is looks like we are going after the Arsenal model of getting anybody who's ever had any relationship to Pep, which fine, so be it. Pep has been probably the greatest manager in history apart from Sir Alex Ferguson, I would say. I think he's solidly implanted himself into the absolute tippity top legendary manager status. And you can see what kind of influence he had on even Arteta. And so clearly he chooses assistants that are worth something. So Enzo Maresca, number one, he was the manager for PL2 for City for a bit, which means he played with players like, not played, but he managed players like Palmer and Lavia. So this is my take on that part, which is, if you've watched City play over the last 6-7 seasons, they seem to just be able to pull someone out of their academy like a Bob or a Palmer, and they slot in perfectly into whatever position Pep wants them to play. They know exactly what they're supposed to do. And that only happens when the head manager and the academy manager are on the exact same wavelength. They play the same way, and they teach their young players to play in these very specific, very regimented roles, so they know exactly when they go onto that pitch what they're supposed to do. So that's a good thing. I think that's a really, really good thing. So players like Palmer, Lavia, I think players that need a structure like Enzo, and possibly even our other attackers like Jackson, guys who just seem lost when they're told to just have their own freedom, they might actually benefit from having a system that's very regimented. And hopefully that's what this coach can provide these players. And I think that's what his track record has shown. I think there were some, like Harry Winks at Leicester City said he's the most tactically brilliant manager he's ever worked with. Sure, I don't actually know the list of managers that Harry Winks has worked with, but I know none of them have been at the very top. So is that worth something? Sure, why not? He's still a professional player. He's played under a bunch of managers throughout his career. So that's something that's really good to hear. Now, I think one of the downsides of having a manager who's so structure-based is it takes time to instill that structure within players. And that's where things can get really dicey, because even if you go back with Pep and City, it took him, I would say, a solid 2 seasons for his system to really set it. And what do people always say, which is a new signing always takes at least a year to learn Pep's system because it is so detailed. He sees the game in such a different way than most other managers do. And it's something that most players aren't used to when they first join the team. Look at Guardiola. He's one of the best center backs last season. And he went through a phase this season where he didn't do very much. And it's taken almost until the end of the season for him to really shine through. And that could be said time and time again for a lot of new players under Pep. That takes time to gel. Look at Grealish. It took him a full season to get used to learn how to play. And then he kicked on and he was part of the team that won them the treble. So that's the thing, is that clearly our sporting directors are willing to give this guy time. They gave him a 5+1 contract, which is, in my opinion, absolutely insane. Like, we learned nothing from Potter. But to be fair, these sporting directors didn't pick Potter, but they really have put all their eggs into the Maresca basket. So, man, they better be right. And this by better start strong. Even if on paper it looks like we're going to give him time, everyone knows there's no time at Chelsea. The amount of pressure that you're under from match-going fans, from online fans, and especially from the pundits and the reporters watching the games, man, they are going to lay into him if he starts slow. And there's going to be so many talks of, hey, look at what Pochettino did. Took us from 11th or 12th all the way up to 6th. If we don't see that kind of improvement right away where we start the season off strong, he's going to be under tremendous pressure. And then it's up to him to see how he responds to that pressure. Does he have a strong enough personality for it? Are the players going to buy into him if things don't start off well? Which I think brings me to my most important point, which is, man, we need to see some positivity in preseason and at the beginning of the season. I would say the first 10 games this season, if we do not see a clear pattern of play, clear improvement from our players, I think he's going to be under so much pressure. And then it becomes a question of how much time are we really going to give him, as fans and, of course, as a club when the pressure is mounting on, right? Now, do I think he could come good? Sure. I mean, I don't know anything about him. I'm always going to support whatever manager comes through because I want the club to succeed. But clearly, this is a manager that needs time. He needs time for players to understand him. Now, hopefully, because some of our key players like Palmer have already played with him, hopefully that means that because Palmer is already our most important player this season, and I think he's going to be the most important player for many seasons to come, as long as he stays at Chelsea and doesn't leave, that if he can gel with the manager, then that's a really, really good start. Now, another thing that's come out in reports why we chose him is because he had a really good interview. Apparently, he already knew ins and outs of every player, of all the loan players, which, fine. But again, it's reported that his salary is going to be over $4 million. If I'm getting paid $4 million to do a job, you better bet your ass I'm going to know absolutely everything during that interview. And honestly, every manager that interviews for any position should know everything about the players of the club that he's about to join. Otherwise, anything short of that is just unacceptable, flat out unacceptable in this sport when it's under that much scrutiny, when there's so much money and finances on the line. Like it doesn't really impress me that much that a manager is doing the bare minimum during his interview, which is to know the team and the job that he's walking into. So the fact that he hit that bare minimum, good for him. It's also concerning that does that also mean that the other candidates did not hit that minimum? Because that would be extremely concerning. But, I would say bare minimum he hit, which is to know our players, know what he wants to do with them. Great. Fantastic. There's a lot of talk about which players we think are going to be good on him, which players are not. I think pretty obviously goalie is that number one position, right? He expects his goalie to be part of the back four. He wants him to step up. He wants him to be part of that build up. And unfortunately, none of our current goalies are able to do that with great confidence. I think Petrovic is our best option, but his long passing is not great. His short passing, his calmness on the ball is great, but I don't think Maresca is going to be too comfortable with him just hitting the ball deep and missing if he's under a lot of pressure. And then don't even get me started on Sanchez. What a ridiculously poorly planned signing. A guy that cannot play with his feet. Every time he gets the ball, I get nervous. It seems like every game he plays, he gives away at least 1 or 2 great chances that end up with goals against us. And that's just not good enough. That you cannot have a goalie do that because it unsettles the whole defense. So he's out. And our backup, I don't actually remember his name. I don't think he's going to be good enough either. He's been our backup, and he's never even been on the pitch, so whatever. So, of course, that means money spent on another goalie. And then, oh, that's right, Kepa's coming back, who is better with his feet, but Kepa is so bad with his hands that that's a big offset. So I don't know if Maresca is able to deal with that, but I guess we'll have to find out. But that means at least one or two goalies that we might have to let go of or try to sell in a really tough goalie market, just to try to bring in someone who can play with his feet. So that's a number one big unknown. And then number two is we still need another attacker. Like, as good as Jackson is in link up, and I think Maresca will like that, his just completely awful, not dependable finishing is just not okay to be our primary striker when we have really no realistic backup. Washington's not ready. He clearly was not ready last season. He's not going to be ready this season. And all our attackers out on loan, like Fofana, I don't really have the confidence to say any of them are ready to be a dependable striker at the Premier League level, especially when our team wants to finish top four. That means we have to have someone who's dependable in getting goals outside of just Cole Palmer. So we definitely need another attacker. Now, do I think getting Osimhen is good? I think Osimhen's a fantastic player. Do I think he would be a big upgrade on Jackson? I really do. Because he can make a chance out of nothing, and that's something that Jackson has not been able to do at all this season. But if you look at the history of striker transfers, or really any transfer, spending world record fees on strikers has almost never ended up being a good idea. So I would actually say probably somebody cheaper, like a Sesko. I think that would be a way better use of our money, because number one, it's not that much of a commitment. And then being a player coming into a club like Chelsea, if you don't have that huge striker tag on you, that means you don't really carry that striker curse like all of our other, world record striker signings like Lukaku and Torres, who are immediately under way too much pressure because of that transfer fee. They wouldn't be under that. And I think that would give them time and breathing space to flourish. And Sesko is way taller than really any other player on the team right now, short of Badiashile. And we unfortunately do need height when it comes to Premier League. We do need height, especially on set piece defending. We need height. So someone having a striker that's really tall would also be extremely helpful. And then it seems like the club wants a new left back. This one confuses me quite a bit, because clearly Maresca likes to play with inverted fullbacks. Now, on our right side, either Gusto or James can invert. No problem. They can both do it. They're both incredible on the ball, great at passing, so they can do it. And they have the athleticism to go into midfield and then get back into defense. But this season, especially, Cucurella on the left has really shown that he's able to do that. Now, unless we're trying to get a backup for Cucurella, which, fine, but, we still technically have Ian Maatsen. He doesn't have to be sold just for pure profit. And then, of course, there's the big elephant in the room, which is Ben Chilwell. What are we going to do with Ben Chilwell? I think Ben Chilwell is actually a fantastic player. He's really good at overlapping, going forward, at shooting, not so good in defense. So, and then, especially this season, he's shown that, man, his link-up play and his passing can sometimes be really, really bad. So he hasn't really shown it in his career that he can invert. Could he do it? Possibly. Could he do it if he were actually healthy and not constantly injured? Maybe, but I can see that being kind of an issue going down the road. So if we're just saying we have one dependable left back in Cucurella, and we need a backup to that, and someone that can invert, sure, I understand that. And of course, I think we need a more experienced defender, but I will also say, if we do not get a defender, I'm perfectly fine keeping Chelesa. Like, if we just keep Chelesa, I think that's almost as good as getting a new Premier League proven defender, because I think he's that good. I think he's one of the best young defenders in England right now. He can defend, he can lead the defense. He's from our academy, so he's got the passion. He loves the club, and he's got really good short, medium, and long range passing, which is really hard to find all in one package. To have a good defender who's quick, who's young, who loves the club, and who's good at passing, that checks every single box that Maresca would be looking for in a defender. So I would be extremely disappointed if he got sold. Now, Gallagher, that's the other big elephant, which is I don't actually think Gallagher fits into this system. Gallagher was all about transition, high energy pressing. Maresca's game is not really dependent on that. It's about slow build up. Everybody has their role, playing in the pocket, turning, good passing, shooting. These things Gallagher are just not, or he hasn't really shown that he's good at the intricate plays. He's all high energy. So I do have a feeling that now that Pochettino is gone, I think Gallagher unfortunately is gone. But I would be okay with that because it doesn't make sense in keeping a player that doesn't fit into our manager's system, right? So if that money could be better used on, let's say, another weakness in the team, which is up front, so be it. I think that's a acceptable trade that I can live with. But what I cannot live with is to sell both of our academy players, or all three really, in Maatsen, Gallagher, and Chalobah, just to bring in second-rate prospects just because they're coming on a free transfer, or another signing like Disasi, which just does not make sense in any way, or Sanchez. So, like I said, I would be okay with Gallagher going if it means we bring in a striker that makes sense, whether that's a Sesko or Osimhen. I can live with that. But anything short of that, I cannot live with. And then finally, I think the big question is, actually two big questions, is what's he going to do with Enzo? Because Enzo is a player that's completely built for a possession-heavy team. Is he going to keep him deeper in midfield? Is he going to push him up front? I have no idea. Apparently, he really impressed our sporting directors because he was able to convince them that he could get the best out of Enzo. I mean, if he can do that, that would be fantastic. I also think Enzo, who's not injured, is going to be a completely different player than the one that we saw this season. And hopefully he's closer to what he was, during the World Cup, Benfica, and especially at the very start of the last season, especially the game against Liverpool where he absolutely bossed the midfield and he was the center of all of our good attacking and passing. I think if that's the player that he can unlock, fantastic. And another big thing is, of course, Cole Palmer. He's already played with this guy before. I think Palmer's so talented that he can really play on any manager. So as long as Maresca recognizes his talent and still keeps him as the focal point of our team, I think this team can go places. What I definitely do not want to see is Palmer getting a reduced role or being really limited out on the wing, out of the touchline where he really can't influence play, right? I want Palmer to keep doing Palmer things, which is playing in the hole, finding space, making key passes, or taking shots himself and being the playmaker that he has been pretty much this entire season. And then lastly is Mudryk. Look, I don't see a good future with him. I think to play under someone like Maresca, who's all about possession, positional play, knowing your role, and being very technically sound, meaning you have to have good first touches, good passing. None of these things are Mudryk. Mudryk is one thing only, which is speed and a lot of field to run into and running behind defense. If he doesn't have that space, if you're asking him to be good link up and build up and passing and knowing where to be during attack and defense and transition, that's just not him. Like, he has probably the worst football IQ of any professional player I've ever seen so far. Now, that doesn't mean he can't improve. He just hasn't shown that his football IQ is up there with really anybody else on the team. And so I feel like he's a player that's really going to get sidelined. I wouldn't even be surprised if Sterling took his place on the left, just because Sterling has played under a system like Maresca before because of Pep. And so, yeah, I think Mudryk is done. And I think if the sporting directors are expecting him to get the best out of Mudryk and have that be a reason to judge him on whether he's going to be successful or not, I think that is a humongous mistake. Overall, I'm going to try to stay positive because what else can you do? I don't want to go into the season negative again. We've done 2 seasons of that so far, and I'm sick and tired of it. I want to get defined behind the manager. I'm excited to see what he can do with just preseason, teaching all of our players a whole new system, and then see what he can do with this team. But I do think that as fans, the most important thing is to have patience. We have to have patience. If we see that this guy is doing the right things, then we have to recognize that good things take time to build, right? I don't think this is going to be a Postecoglou situation where he comes in and we just boss the league for the first few weeks. I think it's going to be where you're going to see flashes of good play. We're going to be heavy in possession. And hopefully from there, we can build something good. And lastly, my God, he's got to fix our defense. Like if he comes in and our expected goals against goes down, I think that'll be the most important thing, because even though Arteta clearly takes on the pep and he likes the high possession play, the first thing he did when he came to Arsenal was to play a very defensive style, to stop giving up goals. And once they did that, then they started building on the midfield and attack. And I think that's what we need to do too. We got to start on the defense, stop leaking goals, and then everything else can follow. So we'll see. I'm sure there's going to be transfer news day after day, especially after the Euros. As we get closer to the Euros, it's probably going to decrease a little bit since all the players are going to be focused on that. But then after the Euros, man, we are going to have a really busy summer. I'm really hoping we bring in good players in those key areas that we really need, and then we offset some of the bloated squad that we have. So lots to look forward to. See you guys next time. Peace.